and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Maqbool with you at PTV World. In today's show, we're going to be taking a look at two important stories. The first is with reference to the unfortunate and tragic death of the Iranian president. And of course, this is something that Pakistan has already expressed great condolences for. We, of course, recently hosted the president in Pakistan as well, and Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif is also very, very upset about this tragic loss and has shared his condolences with the people of Iran and has also visited Iran in this matter. This is important, especially with regards to what it means for the people of Iran and where they actually put the leader of Iran, who's unfortunately lost his life along with his entourage in a tragic helicopter crash. And we also saw evidence of that fact in large-scale funeral in which, of course, huge crowds gathered in honor of the late president. And this, of course, points towards the spirit that the people felt with the president of Iran. But what we're now going to also be focusing on is the impact that this loss has created for Iran and Iran's politics. What exactly is going to be the future? Of course, we have the vice president who is currently going to be the acting president till, of course, elections in the next month. But the impact that that will have, particularly on the current scenario in terms of where Iran is going to be at the current moment in terms of the tenure of the late president, and then, of course, in the way that foreign policy and relations with important countries is going to also be impacted by such a loss, and what will be then the result on domestic politics with regards to the elections and the way forward as well. So we'll take a closer look at what this means in terms of where currently we see Iran, and especially after this loss and the tragedy that the people of Iran are facing, what will be the way forward. In our next segment, we're also going to be taking a look at the development with regards to Gaza. Of course, unfortunately, the genocide continues, while we also know that the ICC is looking into the matter with regards to arrests of Benjamin Netanyahu and other leaders, including Hamas as well. But what exactly the international developments are on this matter is important, particularly in terms of countries like Ireland, Spain and Norway that have also announced that they recognize Palestine as a sovereign state with the pre-war boundaries of 1967. And this is extremely important because the struggle, of course, of Palestinians currently is not something that dates back to October. It actually dates back decades ago, and this continues for quite some time now. And so to be able to move forward with something that the Palestinians have rightfully demanded for quite some time now is extremely important. So we're going to be taking a look at that at our second segment of the show today. For this and more, as always in studios, I've been joined by senior analyst Farrukh Pitafi and Raja Faisal. We've also been joined online by former ambassador Mr. Baluch. Thank you very much, Baluch, for joining us and being a part of the discussion. Let me start with you with regards to, of course, your, comments and words that you would like to share on the tragic death of the Iranian president, who, of course, was hosted very recently by Pakistan as well, and of course, what a tragic loss it has been for the nation. Anything you'd like to say about him, sir?
First of all, I think I'd like to, as a citizen of Pakistan, as the citizen of a country which is neighbor to Iran, with which we have historical, cultural, ideological, and in fact kinship, because we know that several of our Baluch tribes, they live strike both the borders. So we really are saddened, deeply saddened by this tragic loss. It's a loss of not only Iranian people, but it's a loss of the region. It's a loss of the Islamic Ummah, because what had happened was in this tenure of about 2 years, so I think he became the president in 2021, he emerged as one of the most prominent, brave, visionary, and a president which was seen not only within Iran, very active, but abroad. I mean, he was going there. And more than that, I think a leader has to be judged by the kind of decisions he has taken. 3 or 4 important decisions that we have seen that he took as a leader, and which definitely will go down in the history as the golden decisions of his era. Number 1, when Israel attacked Iranian consulate in Damascus, he did not blink, but he replied back as a president, he ordered his forces to reply in kind. And it was for the first time after many decades, I think 40 or 50 years, that any country has really gone on to the territory of Israel and has responded. One. Second was the most important, I think, at the diplomatic front. Again, a historical stroke by him when he reconciled, and the process of reconciliation with Saudi Arabia was undertaken, obviously with the help of and mediation of and role played, positive role played by by China and some other friends as well. Uh, Second and third was his unwavering support to the Palestinian cause. And in fact, fourth, last but not the least, his great leadership of what Iran says the axis of resistance. And of course, fifth, I would say that again, he in dealing with the other global powers in terms of again reclaiming the rightful place of Iran, again goes back to his extraordinary leadership qualities, to which now we mourn that Iran will be deprived, Islamic Ummah will be deprived, and we as a Pakistani would deprive. And of course, I would like to recall this historical visit that he undertook to Pakistan just few weeks back. And I think again, the way he diffused the situation of the tension between the two countries, and within weeks of that sad incident of firing between the two countries, he came back to Pakistan and put Pakistan-Iran relations entirely on new footings. And he even gave targets that he wants to see a bilateral trade to $10 billion. This is only the work of a visionary leader who means business, who wants to see tangible relationship to grow. So I think all in all, it's a huge loss for Iran, for Pakistan, and Islamic Ummah. Ji, sir.
Absolutely. And before we continue, of course, on the impact of politics, I'd like to give Faisal and Farrukh also a chance to comment on this. But Faisal, why don't you get first?
Yes, and obviously when we talk about Ibrahim Raisi, President Ibrahim Raisi, I mean, very recent visit of him, and before that, whatever his stance was on the regional and on the international issues, that was, a stance that needs to be discussed for hours and hours, especially when it comes to Iran having sort of dispatched kind of disgruntled kind of relationship with the Gulf countries. He mended his ways and he sat with them, and he actually started negotiations, and he was receptive towards it. We know that Pakistan tried, and he welcomed Pakistan's efforts as well to bringing both of the countries closer, and China tried as well, and of course later on we saw that both of the countries, they actually welcomed these talks, and during his time this taking place. And then if we talk about relations with Pakistan, very recently he visited Pakistan, and he actually talked about enhancing the existing cultural relations and religious relations between both of the countries. At the same time, when we see his visit of Lahore, he urged to go to the grave of thinker of Pakistan, or Musawwir Pakistan, Allama Iqbal, and he mentioned it there that he is someone who had huge influence over him by the poetry of poet of the East, Allama Iqbal, which is sort of a proud factor for me as a Pakistani as well. For the whole Pakistan, it's a matter of pride. And he visited there, and he actually showed his respect. And then he actually highlighted that Pakistan and Iran, in the filmography sector, they need to, of course, enhance their contributions as well from both sides. And he urged that both of the countries, as they share many aspects of the histories of both of the countries, he wanted to actually merge the cultures and the products related to current filmographies and all of that, because we know that Iran excels in the filmography field. So these kind of things, I mean, they are very important when we talk about people-to-people interactions, people-to-people relations, and he was someone who was a true ambassador of both of the countries' culture, and wherever the culture of both of the country merged, he hailed that and he wanted to promote it further. To me, I think it's a huge loss for not only Iran itself, but of course the Muslim Ummah as well, because an advocate of peace amongst the Ummah has lost.
Right. Yes, Farrukh, anything you'd like to say?
Right, Sana, first of all, one has to actually point out how important the late leader was. And that is very important to understand, because in Iran, of course, the current spiritual leader is very senior and aged. So Ibrahim Raisi was widely tipped as his potential successor, right? With that kind of a stature, you must know how much time and how much effort was actually invested in grooming him and actually empowering him, and then of course he came to power. Now, the thing about all these big leaders is that there is always going to be polarization. There are going to be critics and there are going to be people who are totally in their awe. One example of how popular the leader was actually comes from the funeral event that we witnessed today. There was such a massive crowd. So that actually shows you how popular he was and how loved he was. Now, I couldn't actually, others have actually spoken about regional and international ramifications or import. But I'm merely going to actually confine myself to the relationship between Pakistan and Iran. As I have repeatedly pointed out in this program, I consider people of Iran as my own, as much as people of Pakistan. More or less the same people, but it is not only about faith or, for that matter, even racial stock. We have stood by through thick and thin, despite so many, moments where there seemed to be some kind of disagreement, or we thought that there is going to be some kind of distance between us. Recently, for example, there was this missile exchange that we saw, and after that one would have thought that the relationship is totally is going to be taken to the cleaners. But what happened after that? One, the late foreign minister immediately rushed to Pakistan, and then Ibrahim Raisi Saab also came only a week ago or 2 weeks ago. And his interaction with Pakistanis, his statements repeatedly showed how much he actually regarded Pakistan. So I think that Pakistan has lost a good friend, and of course, those in my book, those who leave early are lucky ones. But of course, those who remain are the unlucky ones. The people of Iran and people of Pakistan are poorer because of his departure.
Yeah,
absolutely. Ambassador Jia, I want to understand now the impact that you think this will have, especially with regards to the domestic politics of Iran, and of course how the country is going to be able to move ahead with this loss. There are of course elections coming up as early as next month, and we of course will be seeing that a lot of the dynamics maybe will change, particularly when we see this particular vacuum being created. There has to be a way forward in which some sort of factors will contribute to a change. Do you think that there's any significant way in which the political dynamic of Iran has been altered because of this tragedy, and will there be a significant change in what would have been part of the elections?
Sana, no. See, Iran, since its revolution in 1979, an entirely new uh, kind of state structure was built, which obviously on the top is the spiritual leader, Ayatollah, and whosoever fills up that post. Then he has what's called the Council of Elders, or Council of Islamic leaders, those who are very close to him and are very senior, like Islamic scholars. And then, of course, we have the Revolutionary Guards, and then we have the Parliament. And around these four pillars, a very robust state structure exists. Therefore, obviously a person of his stature, Shaheed Ibrahim Raisi, and the foreign minister were very towering personalities. One is not to undermine what I'm saying or about to say, but definitely they must have taken this into account, that in any revolutionary system, there will be enemies from within and enemies without. And by saying that, they have always prepared second-tier leadership, third-tier leadership, and so on and so forth. So I think the very fact that after this tragic news came in, the spiritual leader, he came onto the public and he said it and assured the people and the world that Iran's government will continue to function normally. And we did see that it did not take any time when one of the senior vice presidents took over as the president. So I think as far as the function of the state is concerned, as far as the function of the government is concerned, the Iranian government is concerned, there will be just no disruption. Now coming to the policies, what is true for the state structure is also true for the policies. The domestic policies as well as the foreign policy, and particularly the foreign policy, is anchored, the Iranian foreign policy is anchored into their revolutionary ideas, which people might disagree with them, but they have a certain value to those approaches and those red lines which they have drawn for other countries, or those elements that they have given into their foreign policy, and they continue despite changes in the persons. As we see that the nuclear deal, it saw 2 or 3 foreign ministers, only then they were able to sign. And again, when it got disrupted, the new foreign minister, which unfortunately also was one of the shaheeds in this incident, had picked up the pieces and again started to talk to the concerned other parties. So I think there will be, and as far as the support to the Palestinians, I do not see that there will be a wavering of their position on that, or their relationship with some other neighboring countries. I think the state in Iran is, I think there is quite a connection between the state structure as well as the people. And we've seen that by and large, their foreign policy has a full support of their people. Yes, they do little bit vary on their domestic ambience or some semantics or some other very superficial functions of the state. But fundamentally, I think they are resolutely behind the values, behind the state structure, the governing principles, moral principles given by the founder of the Inqilab or the revolution. And I don't see that there will be any change. It will continue. Will continue as far as the foreign policy is concerned. Likewise, domestic policies, because on the domestic front, obviously they have huge challenges, Iran, because of the most stringent sanctions that they face for the last now 30 years. So I see that Iran as a nation will remain united. Its state will continue to function efficiently. And then, mind you, there's one thing more importantly, that they have been able to kind of grown a very like a world quality bureaucracy of their own, which performs function as a bureaucrat, as the law enforcement, or any other. I also had the experience of visiting Iran and meeting some of their bureaucrats. They could be compared with any. They are articulate. They have studied abroad, and they are as enlightened and as aware as anybody else. So I think, given the strong bureaucratic and governmental structure, given the dedicated political rank and file, and a clear vision as a nation. You see, the most important thing, what matters when it comes to the destiny of the nations, is the collective and clear vision of the state, of the nation. So I think, as far as Iran is concerned, you can match it with any other country. Perhaps it will be at the top of it when it comes to a collective vision where they want to go. They know it, and they all united with it. So I don't see any setback to the Iranian policy, to the system, to the economy. They will continue to follow whatever they think is their interest in the domestic front as well as in the export front. Yes, Sana.
Absolutely, and of course, once again, Pakistan, of course, has also expressed its condolences, and of course, the Prime Minister is also there to share this difficult time with the people of Iran. Ambassador Saab, we're now going to move on to our next segment, which is going to take a look at the situation in Palestine and Gaza, of course. And we have seen, of course, this situation develop differently over the past many months now. But especially now, the kind of developments that we're seeing, in particular with the ICC, and then, of course, the announcements by countries like Norway, Ireland, and Spain that they will be recognizing Palestine are very important in terms of a shift that perhaps the situation is taking. How do you see the current situation, particularly if we start off with the recognition that's extremely important of Palestine as a sovereign state with its pre-borders of 1967? What exactly do you think the impact will be of such a step? Do you think that these countries will actually go ahead with this? And if they do, how will that be met with countries such as, of course, Israel or the US and others as to their reaction? And what would that mean for other countries who can possibly join them in the recognition of Palestine?
Let's recall a bit that Oslo Peace Accord was the one which also called and reinforced the original UN resolution for creation of a state of Palestine along with the state of Israel. And in Oslo Accord, it was very clearly mentioned that the Palestinian state will be established in the Palestinian land, which was prior to 1967 invasion by Israel. And Norway was the host, and was a guarantor for Oslo, one of the guarantors of the Oslo Accord. So the very fact that Norway has stepped in front and has taken this initiative, a recognition of Palestinian state and along with other two nations, I think marks a tangible diplomatic and yet another diplomatic victory for Palestinians. In fact, let's recall that out of 195 UN members, about 143 states already recognized Palestine as a state, but its total statehood as a member, full member of the United Nations, is held back because of the likely veto by the US or any other Israeli supporter. But we must not forget that one day Palestinian state would be established. There's no other, it can be delayed, as they say, but it cannot be denied. And I think this very premise is being vindicated by these three recognitions that have come in simultaneously. They send a very strong signal to the Netanyahu regime, the fascist regime, the Zionist regime, which has been kind of spilling the innocent blood of the Palestinians for the last seven months or so. We have already talked about it a lot, many programs. So I think it's a very clear signal to Netanyahu that enough is enough. You cannot have your way, and you can never have that dream to deny Palestinians their state, because that is what he has been capitalizing on, that you let me go on as a prime minister, and I'll make sure I will normalize relations. Abraham 1 and 2, such fig leaf peace accords, and would be able to deny Palestinians their right. So I think that very premise seems to have been put away now, at least as a narrative. So I think the narrative of statehood, the narrative of nationhood, the narrative of existence and identity of Palestinians have been reinforced, at least to the extent of public perception. Yes, its practical implication would take some time, because we know that there are several hurdles to that. The biggest hurdle is the occupation of Palestinian land by Israel, settlement and establishment of settlements. All that has to go back. That obviously will require a huge effort, a huge initiative, and actually I think a moral courage by the international community, and especially those who support Israel, to go ahead and fulfill the promise made to the Palestinian people by the UN resolution in 1947. Yeah.
Right, absolutely. Faisal, I want to understand that while, of course, as the ambassador has pointed out, this has great symbolic value, and of course, this will increase the current international pressure, but I want to understand then what it means in terms of tangible action that needs to be taken, especially in light of US power to veto, and of course, with where we stand currently in terms of the US stance or other countries' stance on the matter that have supported Israel. What exactly will then be the push in the actual relief of suffering for the people of Palestine in this matter?
Yes, and it's a very good question. Of course, knowing the facts that on ground and overall in the front of foreign policy and foreign narratives, of course, we have seen that there are certain countries, and led by, of course, Americans, they are simply siding with Israel, and whatever Israel is doing in terms of bringing this genocide over Gazans and over Palestinians, and nobody is daring to say anything about it. And of course, why? Reason being that the Americans, they have put pressure on the whole world right now, because if we take the example of President Biden, I don't know what words I should be using for him, but the kind of statements coming from him, it is shambolic, and it is highly un-American kind of the statements which are coming, especially when humanity is at stake, human rights are being violated, and international laws.
Can you qualify what you mean by un-American?
Un-American, because America is known for human rights, America is known for the human values, and America is known for a country that always promotes democracy, promotes international law, promotes human rights, and here we are in front of everyone. I mean, 35,000 people are dead, known dead, and there are thousands more who are missing in the action, and of course daily indiscriminate bombing is taking place, and that is of course not being stopped. And by the way, I mean, Biden administration, I won't say that the whole America is favoring Israel, but of course Biden administration is in the favor of Israel and the design which is being created by Netanyahu, and nobody is stopping Netanyahu to do that. But here is the fresh air we have seen. There are countries in the West. I'm talking about Norway, I'm talking about Ireland, I'm talking about Spain. I mean, Norway took the principal stance. They stood for human rights, they stood for international law. Same is the case with Ireland. Ireland's Prime Minister, he was outspoken on this, and he went out of his way to, of course, defend the human rights and defend the international law. And when it comes to, of course, Spain, I was, going through one of the footages shared on social media related to he addressing his own parliament, and while addressing, he announces that he is going to, of course, accept Palestine as a state, and two-nation resolution or resolve is desired, and the borders with which he is accepting Palestine is of 1967 pre-war borders, which is remarkable. And by the way, when he delivered this speech, right after that, it was almost 2 minutes of clap by his parliamentarians. All of the parliamentarians, they were standing up and hailing his statements. This is what you call democracy. This is what you call standing up for the rights of the people. This is what you call standing up for human rights and international law. And there are certain more countries as well. Malta, and then Slovenia, and then France is showing the tendencies as well in terms of course, standing up for the two-nation resolve and standing up for the people of Palestine. This is remarkable. There are countries who are coming to terms with the realities. They know whatever is being showed on the Western media is not the whole truth. The whole truth is that there is a genocide which is being committed in Gaza, which is not being stopped. And of course, these positive steps by the governments of the West, countries like these, they will be the ones who would be, of course, showing a precedent set by their parliaments to throughout the world that this is the way forward, and that madness which is being carried out by Netanyahu and Israel must be stopped now.
Right, absolutely. And Farrukh, I'd like your take on this as well, but add to that also the ICC developments that we have seen with, of course, the request for warrants, including, of course, for Benjamin Netanyahu and other leaders, and then, of course, Hamas as well. There's a lot of discussion, of course, coming in from Hamas' side as well and from other countries' side, such as the US as well. Both have different reasons for how they perceive this as equating the two. But I want to understand what this would mean, especially in terms of the direction that the situation is going to take, and does it have the possibility of an actual issuance of arrest warrants for Benjamin Netanyahu and then an eventual end to this genocide?
Right, Sana, thank you very much for the question. Listening to Faisal and Ambassador Saab, I was thinking how exhausted I feel whenever I talk about this subject, because there seems, usually when you drive a car, you have an accelerator and you have a brake, right? The fundamental issue with driving is that if one of these things is not working, you cannot drive safely, right? But when it comes to international order, there are places where suddenly international order, international rules stop functioning, and that actually gives me this morose outlook about the world, that maybe it is broken beyond repair, particularly when I have to convince myself that there is no hope. There are 2 or 3 regions or categories that I look at. One is Africa, the way the entire continent is ignored, the Indian Dalits for that matter, the way, or untouchables for that matter, and then Palestine and Israel. My worldview is very different. Of course, it is my own point of view. People are people. Half of Israelis and Palestinians cannot be, distinguished easily, with the exception of them wearing a skull cap or the Arab attire or something like that. I would have thought, in my own vision, I would have thought that maybe all this evacuation business and getting one race out of the place or settling the other people could have been replaced by high rises where everybody could share spaces and live happily ever after. But what Faisal was referring to as Americanism, unfortunately, is actually a reference only to a limited quality or quantity of Americanism as we know it in the past. For example, Wilsonian idealism, and then FDR and Truman's world order, the way they built it, was supposed to work. But actually, to be honest, why are we so frustrated? We are frustrated because the entire world order and all these high-minded, intervention tools like the UN, like the UNSC, like ICC, ICJ, they stop functioning whenever there seems to be some kind of serious dispute no matter what happens to Netanyahu, with due respect, those, on nearly 30,000 people who have died so far, they are not coming back. They have been butchered, right? You can actually seek some kind of closure by seeing him put to justice. But will that happen? Honestly, I think that if ICC could actually have its way, Putin would have faced quite a lot of troubles, right? He hasn't. Netanyahu, with Netanyahu, America has its own point of view. America always had this distinction between bad people who are actually opposed to them and bad people who might be working for them in one shape or the other. And there was a quote, I don't want to use it, Reagan referred to General Zia-ul-Haq when he was actually in power in Pakistan. So that kind of relativism is actually killing the world order. And I think that the whole anger is based on this. All this grandstanding and leadership that Faisal was applauding is great, but does it solve anything? It doesn't, right? I need solutions. People of Gaza need solutions right now. And then there is a sideshow that is going on in West Bank. And I mean, there again, people are being killed in broad daylight. Children are being treated as subhuman. The argument, the whole argument that Israel uses, or particularly this extreme right-wing coalition uses, is actually that they are subhuman and they should be treated as such. So with that kind of a situation, if you are asking me, is there any hope? I'm sorry, I'm so exhausted, I cannot give you a proper answer.
Right, I understand that. Ambassador Saab, I want your take as well on how do you look at the future and of course what we've seen continue for decades now, and especially with the past few months and this genocide that the people of Gaza and people of Palestine have been facing. Of course, we are all extremely eager to have this suffering end. But what do you think in terms of your analysis, in terms of how the situation has developed and changed since October at least? Do you think is the hope that that this will actually happen? Do you foresee any real change soon?
And Ambassador Saab, with your permission, there is another interview actually I went through in which the interviewer asked Netanyahu about, obviously there will be sanctions on your travel. Wherever you will be traveling, there are 124 countries which are being told by Karim Khan that Netanyahu would be, of course, arrested in them 124 countries. Shouldn't you be worried about it? And he said that I shouldn't be worried about any of my future travels, but yes, Karim Khan should be worried about his future travels. What does it suggest to you? Isn't it a threat?
Well, I think one shouldn't take such statements by a person, especially like Netanyahu. I wouldn't, this is beyond even arrogance kind of, and it will also distract us from actual debate that we are having. So I'll come back to the foundational question that Sana asked, that what is that we feel should happen or is likely to happen. First of all, my comment is that hope, we have no choice but to be hopeful, because the history has taught us that when even when the entire humanity civilization has fallen into an abyss, there is always, and into a darkness, there is always a ray of hope which then brightens up the day. For example, at the end of the First World War, then again at the end of the Second World War, one thought that perhaps this is the end of the war, of the world. Millions of people were killed. I think about 7 million people were killed on both the sides. So saying that, I think in this doom and gloom, the recommendation of the ICC prosecutor for the arrest of Netanyahu and his defense minister is again a very positive and a hopeful sign that while for most of us, it feels that the entire global structure, a governance structure of the world is broken down, there is still a ray of hope. There is still some people, there is some institution which is intact, and at least it is giving a counter narrative and is asking those people who are committing these human rights violations to be held responsible at the global level. So I think despite all these dysfunctions that we see in the global system is intact. The fact that ICJ held hearings, the very fact that the petition of South Africa, to which Pakistan also became a party, was heard, and certain warning was issued to Israel, by itself is a big, I think, improvement on otherwise a world which would be totally ungovernable. And all these structures which have been now developed are the post-Second World War kind of developments that the world has come to make, believe, and make them function. So I think the world is kind of not functioning the way it should, but still, I think we can't say that it is completely broken and that it's a law of the jungle. No, there's still some checks and balances on people like Netanyahu, who otherwise assume complete immunity and impunity. So I think that myth has been broken. He has been held responsible, and I firmly believe that if Israel can persecute people who were involved in the genocide of the Jews in Germany after 50, 60, 70, 80 years, I'll not be surprised when Netanyahu is 90 years, 95 years old, and state of Palestine really is established 20 years, 30 years, 40 years down the line, and he stands to trial. He stands to be punished. So I think I should remain hopeful, and I should continue to give and this message to our generations, not in only Pakistan, but all over the world. I salute those young people who were standing by the Palestinians in the American universities. We say that American government may be obviously biased and opinionated and somewhat veered and away from its founding principles, but there's still youth standing there. So they would never forget that there was an arrest warrant against Netanyahu. He has to be held responsible. So what I'm saying, I'm pretty confident one day Netanyahu and his Zionist cabinet will have to stand trial, will have to answer, and will be held responsible and will be punished. That's my conviction, and that's my confidence in the goodness of the human goodness that we all have it. Despite all our shortcomings as a civilization, I believe that basic foundational goodness of the humans will never evaporate. It will remain. Yes, it will always be subject to constraints, restraints, and opposing forces. But still, I think human civilization, human values will prevail ultimately. Of course, at times the cost is too much, but then that is how the real world is all about. So I think let's not lose the hope. Let's give hope to the people of Palestine. Let's give hope to the people of Kashmir. Let's give hope to people who are oppressed elsewhere in the world, that the world is not totally broken. There are still some people, there are still structures, global structures, which stand for the values, which stand for the principles on which the entire civilization of the human civilization stands. Yes, Sana.
Right, absolutely, and thank you very much, J.R. Baluch, for those words, and of course for pointing out how important it is for us to hope. But thank you for joining us. You wanted to add something, Farrukh?
Right, Sana, I was not actually speaking against the virtues of hope. I was just telling that I don't have it in me to keep on pretending that there is hope. And I totally believe in the fundamental goodness of human nature. But there seems to be a strange kind of world that has developed where the odds are stacked against the good people. Particularly in the past 10 years, what we have seen, return of racism to the level of treating human beings as subhuman. I gave you example in 3 places, right? But in America, racism is back. In Europe, racism is back. So, am I to believe that suddenly everything, good and evil work in, dialectics? I have no doubt about that. Sun rises, then there is night, then sun rises.
Right.
But there are places in this, on this earth, where there is never the sun, right? It might be in caves, it might be somewhere deep, but I think that we are burrowing into those territories.
Right, absolutely. But perhaps the only way out is through hope, and somehow we learn to survive and get out of those caves as well. But thank you very much, Ambassador Saab, for joining us. Thank you, Farrukh, and thank you, Faisal, for being part of the discussion. That's all that we have time for. We'll now see you tomorrow.